You know, we grew up together and blah, blah, blah. And he told me about kind of what life was like in Chicago in the 20s and 30s, right? You know, this is, the days of Al Capone and, organized crime and things like that. And he said, in Chicago at that time, the neighborhoods were very delineated. You had the Italian neighborhood, the Polish neighborhood, the German neighborhood, the black neighborhood, etc. And you better not go alone into one of these other neighborhoods, otherwise you were going to have to fight somebody. And he said Joe was like a big brother to me, and Joe was a pretty tough guy and got me out of a few scrapes over the years. But he said, he repeated the line, Joe could have been in the majors. And I said, well, how do you know that, right? And I didn't want to press it, but I just said, why do you say that? And he said, I have copies of his contracts if you want to see copies of them. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I have copies of the major league contracts that he didn't sign because he had this good job. And during the Depression, salaries in the majors weren't very good anyway, but he had this job that he could keep long term, and he had a family to support and this and that. And he did. He sent me photocopies of contracts with the Cleveland Indians, the New York Yankees, Chicago White Sox, and then several with very high-level minor league teams. I remember Galveston in the Texas League and a few other ones. So it was true, and it, I had all the information in there, Joe and the salary and blah, blah, and was never signed. So I always thought that was interesting. But one of the other stories that Sam Italia told me, he said Joe one summer had a job sitting on a folding chair in Chicago somewhere, and he got $1 a day to push a button if a police officer came by. And I said, well, why would, what was going on with that? And he said, well,